Cool.
way to work. All right. Here we are. Yeah, of course. You know, I'm gonna just stand during this, even though it's a little bit weird, but I'm just sort of used to doing that, and I like to move around. Yeah. So at any point during this presentation, like, raise your hand, ask questions, engage. If things don't make sense, or if they're just like, what? Dude, that's totally, you're totally blowing smoke. Just challenge and stuff. This is meant to be engaged. This is not dogma. This is all just a sort of compilation of different theoretical frames and ideas, and really trying to put together sort of a narrative that helps us orient to the work that we do, and sort of some of the challenges that we face, and hopefully this will be helpful. So, word prisons, modern media, language, and the roots of anxiety and other mental illnesses. And so we initially created this presentation and have since adapted it. The initial creation was to present at a national conference, the National Association for Therapeutic Schools and Programs, which we did and presented this past February, and got some really great feedback. We've since presented it to our staff, and a version of it to parents in our parent weekend this past April, who just loved it, felt it was really helpful in getting an understanding of why do we do what we do? Like, why don't we just come in and tell them that they can't do that? And if they do that, then this will happen. Like, why don't we just do that? And then I also do a version of this for all of our new clients in the Open Towards Freedom group. So you will get a chance to see this done actually with clients in a different context. So let's go. All right. All right. So this first piece here, I'm going to invite us to really do an eyes closed exercise, and we're just going to listen to some sound. And I want you to just, as you listen to the sound, I want you to just notice what's showing up for you. And just track it. And then, you know, if you find it you're sort of carried off into a sort of sea of tangents, and your train of thought is just taking you somewhere far away, and you notice that, that's great. Just notice that and come on back to the sound. And, you know, you can just be like, oh, that was interesting. What am I listening to? Okay, let's come on back, and then again, just open up and watch what your mind does as it listens to the sound. And you can notice thoughts, sensations, maybe you have some impulses. All of that is just, you know, just, oh, okay, there's that. Yeah, okay, make a mental note, and then come back to the sound. All right? Here we go. And it's about 4 minutes long. Oh, you know what? For some reason, that just turned off. Let me plug it in. I think it doesn't have batteries or something. Where do you plug it in? Okay. Okay, here we go. All right. Let me back up now. Okay. We're off. bring your awareness to your breath for a few breaths. Forgot about that bit. Okay. So I'm not quite sure how to stop this sound here. Okay, we'll just go to the next slide. Okay. What did you guys notice?
I really like the first one, the nature. That was really relaxing for me.
So it was relaxing.
I felt, yeah, relaxed and calm.
Yeah.
And I noticed I was trying to like figure out what all the sounds were, but then I tried to drop that and just listen.
Yeah. So you were aware that your mind was sort of labeling or sort of trying to categorize.
Totally trying to categorize.
Yeah.
And I even started before because I looked at the pictures and I saw, and I tried to figure out like what is going to happen and where we're going next. So that was going on the whole time, and then I tried to drop it. And then in the city, those sounds, at first I felt like a little bit like at home because I'm from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so I grew up with lots of sounds like those. But then it started to get like a little too much and a little overwhelming. And then I kept going back to like wanting more of the like first nature sounds.
Yeah. So it started kind of the layers of all of those sounds at the end.
Yeah, it started
just kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, a little overwhelming. I noticed my mind was wandering the most then, where it wasn't wandering as much during the first two phases of sounds, but during the city one, I started to like think of other things and had to like put more effort into bringing myself back.
Okay, that's great awareness. Wow. I'll bet you practice some meditation in your life.
A little bit.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
What else? Anything? There's no. Just curious about what showed up for you.
I was overall, definitely the nature for me was the most calming. And then for some reason, even though I grew up in South Dakota, the cows for me were really distracting.
Yeah.
And especially the transition of the cows in the city. And it was like those two couldn't go together for me, you know? So yeah, it was, that piece stood out to me.
Yeah.
And not that I grew up on a farm, but farms all around the city I lived in.
Yeah.
So that was a familiar sound, but it was like, ooh.
Yeah, there was
too
one
much.
cow in particular that was like,
Whoa.
wow, like, it sounds like you really need a lot of attention.
Right? A bad day.
Yeah. It's like if I were that cow herd, I would probably be tending to that cow.
Right.
Right?
Right.
What do you need, Betsy?
What's going on for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the city part, I think just the busyness of my life right now was kind of familiar, but not distracting for some reason. It was more like, okay. Yeah. I would choose nature.
I'm familiar with those.
Right, I would choose nature definitely over. But,
Okay.
I definitely found the nature part the most relaxing as well. And also the bells, like the church bells, were very relaxing too. And I imagined some little European town amidst pastures. So that was kind of peaceful. But yeah, the cow at first, I thought it was nice. And then it, for some odd reason, it started like making me feel anxious. Like it sounded weird and made me feel anxious. And then the city, like some of the sounds made it sound fun and exciting and busy, but the sounds of the cars and the phones really brought some anxiety and stress. And
Kind of feel
tightening. Yeah, like a.
Were you aware of any thoughts?
I did think of when the cell phone's ringing, like, oh, I for some reason I hate the sound of the phone ringing. And I realized that before, and I thought of that. It reminded me of that.
Just pick up the phone. That's what's going on for me. I'm like, just pick up the damn phone.
It's like, why are they calling?
Right. Cool. And like with the sounds of the bells, like you were able to like sort of imagine this whole scene, right?
Yeah.
Like just from like. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, and actually for all of them, it's very visual.
Yeah.
I definitely put pictures and imagery to it.
Yeah, so they were all associated with this imagery that you can sort of live into. Wow,
Yeah.
cool, cool. All right.
Should I share?
Yeah, if you'd like. You don't have to.
Okay, well, I guess I will.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely the nature was a lot more relaxing. And like a space to open into, and then the cows, were so abrasive, and like almost like I felt like I had to protect myself. Like I felt like oh, gotta get away from that. And then in the city transition, like I definitely dissociated a little bit, or like went away a little bit more, and like I didn't want to bring myself back to hearing it. I was like, oh,
So there's something like, I just don't even want to listen to that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, exactly. Just like general nervous
Okay,
system closing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. So, we did this. It was sort of like, kind of like an audio tour through human evolution in some way, right? It's sort of like, we spent a lot of time, like, as early hominids, kind of relating to a natural environment, like, where we were really embedded within an ecosystem that we needed to pay attention to in order to survive, right? A little less so now for us modern humans with comforts of like corner market and cars and eradicating apex predators from our cities. Right? I mean, it's like we don't necessarily need to pay attention when we're crossing the street and things like that, right? But like, but we've kind of gone through like kind of being part of nature and then sort of tending to nature really as a sort of agrarian societies for the bulk of civilization's history until our sort of industrial revolution, and then really sort of started moving into cities when we got to be a lot more symbolic relations, right? We started people started getting weird jobs in financial management. And like that didn't exist when there was like, I'll give you 4 cowrie beads for that oyster. Like, okay, well, what kind of derivatives can I do with these cowrie beads, and send them off to Wall Street? And, like, that didn't happen. We started getting more and more abstract and weird. Cool. So, a lot of our clients, when they come to Living Well, not all of them, but a lot of them are coming from wilderness therapy programs. And there's a lot of different wilderness therapy programs, and some have more of a kind of a Gestalt focus, some are really CBT focused, some have sort of more like kind of Aboriginal kind of walkabout, kind of like we just go out and we like weave baskets out of reeds and like that's the healing. But like what they have in common is that they all go out into the wilderness, right? So one question I had, like, what are some thoughts about like what would be the benefit of taking Kid out into the wilderness specifically? Like what, regardless of sort of what therapy happens in there, the setting is such that like they all believe it's a good idea to go out into the wilderness, that there's something therapeutic in that context. What comes to mind?
The first thing is just less distractions. It's not as easy to distract. For me personally, like I have so many distractions here and at home, but not as many in the wilderness.
What kind of distractions? I mean, like I could get distracted by a juniper bush.
I guess like there's more consuming distractions, like TV, or like
consuming distractions.
like TV or like the internet, my phone, like those kinds of things. Mostly electronics.
Okay.
And it's just easy for me to like totally get sucked into them and just be really distracted from like what's really going on in my body and present. And like in the present, but then in the wilderness, I don't really have those, and it's just much like easier to feel what's going on in my body. that starts to get louder. Yeah.
So there's this type of experience that you talk about, like the awareness of body, and you talk about like sort of lose touch with kind of what's happening really now, right? And you sort of get the imagery, like you said, I get sucked in, and it's like into this other world, so to speak, as if you like went through the wardrobe of Narnia, and you went into this weird distractor land.
Distractor land.
Right? I mean, it's like it's as if you're getting carried away in that imagery of how you talked about it. So, and that sort of like in the nature, there's just sort of less of those kind of portals into some other quasi sort of, it's not really happening here and now, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I think listening to that, like, first thing we all experience, like, a general nervous system relaxation. And I think that totally happens in the wilderness. Just like there's more space. And you're reconnected with your humanity. I think that happens for me and for a lot of people too. Like, working as a wilderness guide, like, I definitely see that, or saw that happen. Just like, oh, I'm a human being, and I have to, like, help myself. I have to, like you say, pay attention to my environment, and, like, food becomes very important. Like, where I sleep becomes very important, like how to get water. All these very basic elements become like primary. And I had a point. What was it? Anyway, just everything is scaled down. Oh, right, and all the, like, cultural messages we get.
Cultural messages.
Like, it's like the possibility opens for them to start fading away. And the individual to experience a direct connection with their own humanity. So I think that's powerfully healing.
So there's something about, maybe something about these distractions that in that there's sort of cultural messages that are coming through, that we sort of take that away and we focus on sort of what's really essential right here and now, like food, shelter, surroundings. Is a storm coming? And then there's something about, like, getting connected with our humanity, which I don't think you're talking about, like, that our humanity is really just about, like, grunting and eating and finding shelter.
Just our being as a human, like our existence in a body, like on the planet, like, oh wow, that's so primary. Like, and I see that easier to contact sometimes in the wilderness.
Great. Okay. Any other thoughts to share that have been covered?
I just think of, kind of to go off what Miriam said about, like, the unknowns or the unexpected things that nature provides, you know, from animals to storm, like you said, and just like how we respond to that, how, like, the innate part of us responds to a rainstorm. Do we just sit in it and feel it, or do we take shelter? Do we watch an animal? Do we hide from it? Do we? Yeah.
So we're sort of like subjected to things that are just out of our current ordinary day-to-day life, but yet have been part of our sort of lineages, day-to-day life, stretching back eons since the beginning, since the first life form sort of crawled out of the ocean.
I don't know exactly how this works, but I just feel like when you go out to nature, go out to the wilderness, it just seems so much bigger than you are, and many problems that you've been dealing with might be put into perspective when you're thinking of just this bigger, older, wider world.
It's like if you're thinking about problems, then you look at the big world and you feel your sort of basic needs that need to get met. Okay.
Kind of,
so there's a bigger
simplifies,
context or bigger. Okay. Cool. So, thanks for sharing. So, for like most of human history, we can sort of look at, like, how did we direct our attention and our awareness, right? Sort of like, we're talking, there's this sort of things that we get distracted by, and then there's sort of like experiences of our body that we can connect with. And sort of when we remove those distractions, our attention actually goes more into the present moment, goes more into our immediate surroundings, right? It's sort of like more attunement you were talking about to sort of like well, what happens when it starts raining? How does that impact me? Like, what changes, right? So for the bulk of human history, we can sort of look at like, okay, the economy of our attention, like how we spend our awareness, like where we spend our time focusing on. It's sort of like 5 sense experiencing, right? Like we're paying attention. We had to hunt, we had to gather food, we had to like, keep track of the herd. We're scanning the landscape here and now. We're listening for cues, right? We're doing that. And then we sort of like interact with our tribe or our village or our family and whatnot. And there's some sort of conceptual experiencing, and we're going to sort of go deeper into what that means, sort of more technically in this context, in this setting. But sort of like, words and symbols, we're sort of like a little less, right? We're spending a lot more time focusing on here and now stuff, and a lot less time sort of reading. Like books were pretty rare, and like the written word was a sort of precious commodity, right? So we can say that like today, we can say in sort of our world today, currently, those proportions are flipped. And what we see is that we spend a lot more time relating to conceptual and verbal stimuli, and a lot less time focusing on sort of what's happening here and now in my environment, because we don't need to. We don't need to pay attention to that for survival. That's been freed up. Our brain and our mind are now able to expend those precious resources of all the sort of calories that are burned by just thinking, just powering this thing in our central nervous system. Freed up to then deal with more and more abstract things, and particularly so as the sort of compendium of human knowledge has grown and has accumulated, like technology for more and more sort of abstract things has increased. We have little pocket computers that send us all sorts of messages, right, that we can decipher, like visually, audially, right? Like we can sort of see a picture on a movie, we can like read text and all that stuff, right? I haven't gotten smells through the phone, fortunately. So one of the things we can look at is sort of like just what are the numbers, right? So like 100 years ago, you were lucky to read the equivalent of 50 books in a lifetime, right? The average person. Right? As of 2010, we're bombarded by the information equivalent. So if you put all the information into sort of like bytes, right? With sort of like images being a lot of bytes and like words being less bytes, we're bombarded by the equivalent of 174 newspapers a day of information. Right? In terms of all the images that we pick in, the sort of radio and sound, movies, sort of just commercials, all that stuff, right? This is 5 times the amount of information we were exposed to just 25 years ago. So you see this, there's something happening in our environment that is rapidly shifting how we as human beings spend our time, and particularly spend our awareness. What are we focusing on? And we've seen a 5-fold increase just in 25 years of really being bombarded with conceptual data. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So and then we produce an average of 6 newspapers per day, which is 200 times the amount just 25 years ago. A large part of this is just like how many selfies we take. It's like, and then we share those on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and I don't even know what else. So we are just adding to all of this, right? So it's wild. So it's like we can imagine that we sort of go through our day and our sort of thought bubbles are sort of like, just like the cultural messages that bombard us, like sort of thought bubbles kind of just bombarded with things like this, which that's not bad because there's still some space, right? Like there's some space there, like, oh, thank you. And what's for dinner? Oh, I love you too, honey. Oh yeah, pet the dog. Right? But like, with the 270 or 170 newspapers a day, it's like, whoa, like it's kind of more like that, right? And when we delivered this thing in the first place in that conference, we were in Vegas. Has anybody been to Vegas? Has anybody flown into Vegas? No. Well, if you fly into Vegas, it's unreal, as you might imagine. Like, you're in the secure area of the airport, and then the little train takes you to the insecure area of the airport. And as you go into the insecure area, I like calling it that. I just thought of that. There's a lot of insecurities in Vegas. So when you go to the insecure area, like you come off the train and then you go into the little thing, and then the doors open, and then all of a sudden you're in this realm of rampant consumerism, and like there are like TV things everywhere on poles that have like multiple TV things on all sides. There's dudes handing out like pictures with girls, like girls, limos, get water for free. And there's sound and like bing, 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 and then there's like video, slot machines, and all that stuff. And you're like, oh my god, I could literally feel like my forehead just like tighten, like ah. You know, it's like I felt like, you know, when you walk out of the eye doctor and you've had your eyes dilated and it's just like painful to take stuff in. It kind of felt like that. All right. So, anybody watch Portlandia?
Yeah.
You may be familiar with this. Oh, come on! What is that? No. Come on. Where are you? There we go. All right. Familiar with this?
I was gonna say this.
Okay, Ms. Bronston, you are here to declare social bankruptcy. I want you to be clear on what this means. You will be absolved of all debt. All your Facebook friends will be gone. All your emails and voicemails will be deleted. All your Twitter followers will be gone. We will start with a clean slate. But this is kind of the nuclear option. Did you get that?
It's like it physically hurts when it goes off.
I just want you to know
Sorry,
what...
hold on.
If you need to, you know, like a couple friends' Instagrams or something...
I don't want to do any of that anymore.
We do offer counseling to help you sort of get out of debt.
I tried that. I feel like my bandwidth is just full.
I have some template responses I use. Pet pictures. I'll just write cute, just like with a bunch of O's. No, C-Y-O-O-O-O-T.
I appreciate that you're dealing with it. I don't want to live my life like that. You're supposed to put that in there?
I'm so jacked up right now. You know, Pink retweeted me recently.
Yeah, that must feel fulfilling.
Huge. One of my biggest ones. Play on words. I said, Abacus is a machine you can really count on.
Can't wait to miss out on jokes like that.
All right, Ms. Bernstein. You can sign right there.
I'll go to the library and find something in a book and...
What's a library? Is that like a big Kindle?
Oh my God, Fred, I just got back from Powell's. I got so many books. I got that one Lori Moore book that I have not read yet. I went to acupuncture, then I got a massage. I just have so much time. I feel like I'm just soaking it all in. I feel so alive.
I'm sorry, do I know you from someplace?
Seriously?
Yeah. You seem very cute. And I
Okay.
hope that we met somewhere great. Are you visiting Portland?
Fred, it's Karen.
Carrie. Carrie what?
Brownstein, B-R-O-W-N-S-T-E-I-N. Listen,
Okay, are you on Facebook?
I'm not on Facebook anymore.
So you're not on there. Are we friends?
Yes, we're best friends.
We're best friends.
We're best friends.
Let me just Google you. Wow. I've never seen a blank Google page. It looks like you don't exist. You're not on Google at all, Carrie Brownstein.
Steen.
I don't know anything about you if you're not on here or on Instagram or Instagram.
No.
So, I mean, that kind of like overload, right? And that's sort of like how much of our relating is now being mediated, right? And there's sort of like this sense of we are so much more connected. And that may be in some situations, in some ways. And what's missing, right? So, one of the things we're talking about is that this is a rapidly changing context and environment, right? Like, and we sort of grown up with it. And so it feels like, oh yeah, this is the new thing, right? But now everybody has iPhones, right? Or everybody has a smartphone now. And you two are getting some. And now I'm feeling so like, oh, you don't need it.
I don't want to a check-in at a restaurant.
Yeah, no, you don't need to do any of that. You don't need to do any of that. And yet, the social environment, right, our social community, has these expectations now, and you cannot meet those expectations, and that's fine. That's a choice, and more, that takes courage to make that choice, as opposed to like that's just how it is, right? I don't check in anywhere. I check in with the person I'm with, right? I don't hold on. Right. So this is a changing environment that we're living in, and it's like this is not that uncommon. Right? Yeah. Right? Like they may be texting each other, who knows? Right? And also it's like, I mean, our schools, like, we need to relate to the computer, and like, it's a tool, right? This is not, the computer is an enemy, right? Right, so this is a tool, and it's a tool that we're relying more and more on. And it's not just a computer, it's all sorts of media, you know, whether it's a billboard that you pass on the street, or, you know, or your iPhone, or whatever it is, right? So what this is doing, this is creating an environment where we're experiencing a lot more of what we call verbal stimuli, right? Sort of conceptual processing that's happening, as opposed to formal processing of like 5 sense experience. Does that make sense? Okay, so what is this? So when we drill down into, you know, the sort of behavioral theory that underlies acceptance and commitment therapy, we start looking at this theory called Relational Frame Theory. And this is really kind of where ACT grew out of, was Steve Hayes really expanding on Skinner's work in terms of looking at what makes us humans different in terms of learning and behavior and choices and influencing behavior from the pigeons and the rats and the dolphins and the monkeys and all the other stuff that you can put in a box and have them press levers or go through mazes, right? Like, humans behave differently, and Skinner kind of put all this stuff into kind of rule-governed behavior, and kind of that was kind of a black box. It was Skinner's black box. It's a black Skinner box. And it was sort of like, well, you know, there's this thing that we do with language, and he didn't quite figure out in his lifetime how to create a theory of language learning that would allow it to then be studied in sort of behavioral learning labs, and sort of look at it, so what's actually happening, so that we can drill down into basic processes that we can study, so that then we can influence and shape and understand more about sort of how to predict and influence behavior for human beings. So let's just take a look at a few of the core processes that relational frame theory kind of gives us about language learning, and thus then what makes human learning a little different from rats and pigeons and all that. So one of the things is that everything is or can be related to everything. This is one of the beautiful creative elements of language, right? So to kind of illustrate this point, like, give me a proper noun, not a proper noun, a common noun.
Leaf.
Leaf. All right. And give me another common noun. Someone else.
Car.
Car. Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask you this random question. I just want you to play with me here. Okay. I'm going to put forward this question. It's going to be weird, and you just like tell me how we can do this. How is a leaf the parent of the car? Just any chain of analysis we can sort of look. How can the leaf be a parent or have given birth to a car?
Well, you know, leaves are organic material, and over the past like hundreds of thousands of years, that organic material has been compounded into like I don't know what it becomes, like. Oh, right, obviously, like gasoline.
Yeah, hydrocarbons.
Yeah, hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
And so that it allows for the birth of a car.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. All right. So the leaf is a parent of the car, right? Because the car isn't really a car if it doesn't get you anywhere. And so you need to put fuel in there, and the leaves create the fuel, and the fuel, right? So it does that, right? The leaf is a parent of the car. We just created that relationship. How many of you have had that thought before? No? None of you had that thought before. Right. But we just went through a chain of logic. It's flimsy logic. I'll get that. And yet at the same time we'd be like, oh, okay. Like I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see that. Right? Should we do another one? Okay. All right. Give me now.
Water bottle.
Water bottle.
Lion.
Lion?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. How is the water bottle a cousin to a lion? I got one that just came to mind. A lion's body, like a human's body, is like 85% water, right? So most of what's contained in the lion is water. Most of what's contained in the water bottle is water, right? So the water bottle and its cousin to the lion. We could say that, right? Could we say that? Yeah. Okay, so let's say a water bottle, and give me something that has absolutely no relationship to a water bottle. That's complete. Yeah.
A cement block.
A cement block. How are those not related?
Well, one's solid and one's liquid.
Okay, so the relationship is that they're opposites in terms of solidity. Yeah?
Yeah.
So it does have a relationship.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, right? So do you see where we're going here?
Yeah.
That we can create relationships between anything through the power of language. That there doesn't need to be formal relationship between the two things, right? And so this is called mutual and combinatorial entailment. And this sounds like awful word. I know those words probably used to be like, put me on. And it put me off at first, but one of the things that I realized is that this is Steve Hayes right here. And one of the things he's doing, he's trying to create a he was creating a theory about language learning, recognizing that anything is and can be related to everything. And so one of the things he needed to do to be precise, needed to create sort of words to describe these processes that don't have that many relationships that are already established, right, in our language community, right? So have you ever heard of the term combinatorial entailment before? Right, so you don't have a lot of baggage, right? So we can be precise when we use this, that it's referring to this. Does that make sense? Okay. So another question that, okay, so when we talk about sort of the verbal rules, it's not only like words. Words don't necessarily need to be involved. Once we've sort of gotten the sense, gotten the gist of how do we relate symbolically one thing to another, right? So to demonstrate this, which one's more? Which one has more? Or which one's bigger?
The one on the right.
This one?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Great. Right. Formal properties. Right. The volume. It's bigger. We can teach a chimp to sort of pick this out. We can teach a pigeon. We can probably teach a goldfish to choose the bigger one. Right. So now let's do this. Which one is more?
The more what?
Right? It gets interesting, doesn't it?
Right.
Now you're like, oh, now it's kind of arbitrary. Now it's kind of arbitrary. Because now we're talking about money and value. And in terms of that thing, and that correspondence, this is more than that, right? This still weighs more, this still is bigger, right? It's still thicker, right? And yet, when we go and we want to buy a piece of candy, I could probably get a bigger, better piece of candy with that than I could with that. If I can still find a candy shop that sells me something for 5 or 10 cents. Right? Go to the 5 and dime. Right? I haven't been to one in a long time. So does that make sense? Like there don't even need to be words here, but but through our language learning and through our language community, we've sort of realized that like, oh, well this is more in that context, right? But if I wanted to throw it at somebody and kind of give them a welt, I would still choose that one because the formal properties dictate that that's going to be more effective, right? Okay, so another property of sort of language that we're looking at, and when we talk about these verbal processes and how does it actually sort of work to both, obviously get the value of language, but in the other sense, like this is talking about word prisons, right? This is the name of that talk. So it's like we're looking. So what else is showing up that is interesting to us in this is that we relate to words and we relate to the sort of things that they're pointing to. We don't need to experience. We don't necessarily need to go to that village in Europe and hear the church bells in order to get an experience of like what that might be like, right? Like when you heard the church bells in that thing, like it was like, there, and I can actually feel like maybe I could smell the nice food coming from that Tuscan village. I feel relaxed, and there's like, it's nice traveling, right? As if it was real, kind of thing. And that was just like sound, but it was associated, right? Like you knew that there was sort of a church, and it's sort of an old church, and from the sound of it, right? So this is starting to get into this stuff. So another way to sort of bring this point home is, so you guys willing to do another little exercise? Yeah, great. So I want you to imagine that you have in your hand a beautiful, like Tiffany cut crystal goblet, right, or a wine glass. Just imagine it's there. And I have an improv background, so I have to do the scene work, and I have to do the object work while I do this. I'm not going to drink from that now. And I want you to just imagine that every time you have a little extra saliva in your mouth, I just want you to just deposit it into the goblet. You just deposit that extra saliva into the goblet, right? And so we do this for about 5-10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes or so, until you have about maybe like, maybe about the amount that you would have for a small glass of wine or something in there, of your own saliva. Right? And I want you to imagine that you just put that to your lips and you just sort of tuck it back and you just take all your saliva back into your mouth and swallow it back into your mouth. I'm seeing some faces, I'm hearing some giggles, there's some cringing happening, right? Right, what? It's true. Did you have like, you had kind of a visceral reaction? Some of you might have had kind of a visceral reaction, maybe kind of feel it in your stomach a bit, or kind of like tightening, like, oh, yeah? Right. And where is that experience? Where is that experience happening? Like where, like, I just babbled some sounds, right? Sounds that you have some history with, so you're able to sort of like, put them together, and create this sort of like experience in your own mind, right? And then it was kind of revolting to you. So that's weird. And another thing that's weird is like, you swallow gallons of this stuff every day. Already, you're doing it right now, right? What's different is just the way that we relate to it, right? When it's inside, it's saliva, but when it's outside, it's spit, right? And it's a totally different thing, right? It's like, but yeah, so concepts mediate our experience, and we relate to that stuff as if it's real, right? Like it totally shifts the way we sort of frame and actually experience stuff as if it's true. Right? All right, so one of the things, this is called transformation of stimulus function. This is my best Steve Hayes voice. It's actually more of a caricature voice than it is. So, yeah, I'm not going to get so much into that, but like, basically, with with those two things, the combinatorial attainment, that like if Billy's bigger than Sue and Sue is bigger than Rob, right? Then Billy's bigger than Rob, right? That sort of transitive property. So like this relates to this, which relates to this in a certain way, and so therefore this relates to the other thing in a certain way, right? We don't need to train all the steps once we know the relationships, right? So it's like, you know, good girls keep their voice down and agree with people, right? And Chrissy yelled at her mom. Is Chrissy a good girl? No, Chrissy's a bad girl. I want to be a good girl, so I won't yell at mom, right? I mean, like, these are these weird little things that are totally common, totally natural, right? And we can just infer this, right? It goes both ways. One of the things that I didn't get into is that like those combinations, like if this is bigger than this, once we learn language, we don't need to be trained that then this is smaller than this. We know that bigger and smaller have a correspondence, that we can infer the opposite. Does that make sense? This is sort of the dualistic nature of language here. It's like we start to get trained in this way of relating to the world through our the symbolic relations that the world around us, the social community, our fellow language speakers kind of dictate, and we infer a lot of that, right? So then the transformation of stimulus function is like, so good equals, good equals getting rewards, good equals, being a good girl is you get rewards, right? And so you feel good, right? So then being a bad girl means you would feel bad, right? And so like you might have the thought, I'm a bad girl, and then feel bad, because the stimulus function of bad girl is then transformed to that feeling. It's not a great example of that, but we'll get into this a little bit further. Okay. Any questions at this point? Or, no? Kind of like, where was this going? Okay, cool. So again, we're not demonizing language here. One of the things, language, obviously, it's what helped us grow, get on top of the food chain, and create the mess that we're living in now, which is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess, right? Like exquisite technologies. So language helps us learn really quickly without first-hand knowledge, right? So, tiger, when I say the word tiger, some of the stimulus functions of that sound, because you're English speakers, the stimulus functions of that sound might be elicit fear, the sense of power, right? The cat that's kind of stalking, like, what's going on? All that stuff might be elicited when I say the word tiger. If you're a Chinese speaker and you didn't speak English, and I said the word tiger, it'd be totally neutral, right? There's none of those functions that are associated with that sound, right? So we can say, somebody can come back and be like, don't go in that cave above the river because there's a tiger that lives there. It's like, cool, okay. I'm afraid of that cave now. I don't need to see the tiger in order to feel fear of that cave and then avoid it for my own health and the health of my future kids, right? We can collaborate, coordinate with others, envision things that don't exist, right? Like, this is awesome. This is like the root of all possibility. And this is when we talk about values in our therapeutic work. We help people envision a life that they haven't yet experienced. Or maybe they've had glimpses of, and they can say, wow, we can do more of that, right? This is how we heal our psychological wounds, is that potential to sort of work in a language-mediated relationship to help people sort of see potential, see a future that they would be willing to put up with the difficult pain and despair of contacting their past trauma, and all of that stuff in order to work towards something that doesn't yet exist, that they believe could exist, right? And then without language, we would not be able to, without that sort of like sense of as if it were real, we wouldn't have books that would carry us away to another world, look at a painting and see not just like canvas and color, but like see just this vision of the artist's inner life that they're conveying, and be totally touched by that and feel something about that. Beautiful. Another thing, we can delay gratification based on a promise of a future reward or punishment. This is how rats don't quit cocaine, right? You start administering, you start giving, like instead of little food pellets, you give cocaine. That rat is going to keep administering itself cocaine until it dies of a heart attack. It's not going to be like, my cocaine habit's getting really tough. Like, my little rat wife is totally on my back. Right? I'm really stressed because like, my relationship is going to heck, and my little rat kids are not going to have a dad if I keep doing this. You're right, maybe I should stop pressing the lever. Right? They don't do that. They don't do that. They can't take that perspective. Right? That's something that language allows us to do. Okay. So, those things. Hello! I'm like, I wish I knew shadow. Okay, so one of the things we're talking about is we're looking at like, what are the different bars of the word prisons, right? What are the things that get us ensnared that we're working with? And so we just talked about a few of those things, right? And also some of the wonderful things. So we're going to sort of shift gears to another one of these bars here. And it has to do with our rules. Remember that sort of rule-governed behavior that sort of Skinner was talking about? It's like, there's something that happens with our rules, right? And it's different from rats, right? So like with a rat, like you might have a rule, which is basically like a contingency that the rat needs to press 2 levers in a certain sequence in order to get a reward, right? In order for it to get a pellet. We'll do a pellet. I'm gonna stay away from those coke down. So the rat's gonna press like, oh, once it learns that like, okay, I'm gonna get rewarded when I press levers. Okay, that's cool. I'm gonna press the lever, and it figures out the sequence, and then it presses it consistently, right? So it's like left, left, right, left, 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 okay, left, left, right, left, 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 right, left, and then the researcher changes the contingency. So now it's like left, right, right, left. Okay, the rat's like left, left, right, left. Left, left, right. That's not working anymore. Left, right, left, right, left. No, that doesn't work. Left, right, 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 right. And then it randomizes pretty quickly once it stops working. It's like, I'm not getting my reward. What? Okay, now I'm going to go back to randomly doing this because it's already been trained that like if you press a certain sequence, you get rewarded. It's like that doesn't work anymore. Okay, and then it figures it out. Left, right, right, left. Okay. Oh, pellet. Oh, look at that. Maybe that was it. Left, right, right, left. Pellet again. Look at that. Oh, and it's really happy. And then you change the contingency, and it's going to do it again. It's going to randomize it pretty quickly. And like the rats are good at this. The chimps are good at this. The dolphins are good at this. The parrots are good at this. Pigeons and all that stuff. The one dude that isn't is like this guy, right? And so it's like we're the worst at that. And like to illustrate this, they were like, "That's really interesting." There's just so like, what's going on here? There's something about rules that are happening here, right? So then they kind of there's just in humans. They're classic experimental design. So you have 2 groups of humans, and one group. Let's say they're going to play. They're going to do a similar thing. They're going to do a certain sequence of things, and then they're going to get points when they do that certain sequence. And one group, you say, okay, here's how you get points. All right, you do this, and you press that, and then you do that. Okay, and so that group is like, okay, well I know how to do that. I do this, and I do that, and I do that. Oh, points! Yay! All right, and then you have this other group, and you're like, get points. And you're like, okay. And so like this group is here. They're getting points right from straight off the bat. They're just earning points, and they're just like gamblers in Vegas on a high rollers, right? There's a bam, and this group over here they're like boy points points point, and they figure it out, right? So now they start earning points at the same rate once they figured it out. All right. So once they're there, you're like great. Okay, both groups are earning points. They both figured it out. Then you change the contingency. Right? You change what they need to do in order to get rewards. What do you think happens?
The group that you didn't tell the rule to is going to like figure it out a lot faster.
Boom! Exactly. Right? The group that you didn't tell the rule to, they start to randomize their behavior much quicker than this other group. This other group is like, I did this and he told me it would work. It worked before, why does it work? They do it harder, they do it faster. It's like, it's like that like, do you speak English? Do you speak English? Right? It's like, it doesn't work, guys. Right? So So there's this thing, right? That's like, we have this sense, it's like, we relate more to the rule in that it has worked in the past, and that it was a rule for us, and that somebody told me so it must be true, or whatever version of that. And when the environment changes, it's harder to let go of that. You keep doing the same old thing that doesn't work. I think Einstein had a little quote about that, right? The sort of definition of insanity. So, you know, in sort of the behavioral speak, this is called rule insensitivity, right? And so this is where learning from your own experience allows you to generalize your learning into new environments and new contexts, much better than somebody just telling you what to do, right? Because when somebody tells you what to do, you're just going to do that, and you're going to pay less attention to whether or not it works, because you're just like, well, somebody told me what